Hi everyone, just going to go through a demo of the new units. These particular ones differ from the old ones in a few different ways, so I want to cover those and demonstrate setting them up initially and operating them. So what we have here is one of the units. So we have its motor unit, will turn up looking like this. You have the option to put these in if you want to put an elastic band over the top to tension it down. And you'll have the spin head, so that just fits in there, rotate it round until it drops onto the shafts in here. So there's a motor shaft in that. Now that slits on to here, just push it down as far as it goes. And then here, we just clip it on. Now this is going to be a bit tight, so it'll need to be sort of worked in, and tight is good, because it means it's not going to wobble once it is in, it's quite firm. Okay, so we need some power, and this thing's going to take a bit to warm up. Oh, the motor's on. So what we want to do is we want to go into the menu, skip that. To move from one menu item to the next, you just keep pressing the menu button. The adjustment buttons are up and down. For this one, the heater is on and the temperature is set for as 135, which is arbitrary. I think the tuning on this has the temperature somewhere between 20 degrees and 30 degrees for its full range. Typically the temperature sensors that are out there do like from 0 degrees to 45 degrees or 50 degrees for their full range. So yeah, I've amplified that quite significantly because it's amazing how little a bit of temperature change can make a huge difference. So anyway, that's set to 135. And I'm not going to save it at this point. It's just going to do its thing. So that's warming up. Now one of the things that's changed is the backstop. So we'll just try and bring that up here. Hopefully we can... so hopefully that's visible and not blurry. It's a nut head, a rounded nut head. It actually works quite well. And so what we have here is a little adjustment tool, and you can use that to actually adjust that as needed. So when we set the projectile up on this, I'll zoom, be aware it's going to wobble. So, okay, so what we want is that you can see the boat tail there, the alignment of it, just in here, is behind the center or the peak of the ball. Now these are Delrin balls. I've used those instead of stainless steel. I did a little test and found that these had less friction. So I've shifted to using these. Doesn't mean they couldn't be popped off and steel ones put in if you wanted. So anyway, you need the boat tail to start behind the peak on those projectiles. This one's probably a bit too far forward. So I'll just wind it back a touch, and that's a bit better. Now we can see this has been warming up. It's been warming up for a little bit, but the temperature is still on 1. So it's probably a bit cooler here. It's probably about 16 degrees inside. So I'm just going to put that to the back and do the others. So and I probably didn't have any on the screen while I was talking then. So we have another one. should use the same one. Okay, so that's the second one. Oops, wrong end. So that one there, that'll warm up. Excuse the noise in the background, that's my kids. Okay, so that one's in, and lucky last. Fun times. Let's see. Yeah. I didn't check that one for setback. Oh, that's good. And this one. Okay. Okay, so that's in. Now, a couple of things. So one, you might find that the friction from the O-ring here on the projectiles insufficient, and it doesn't turn the projectile readily enough. What to do in that instance is to actually get a bit of sandpaper, a bit of wet and dry sandpaper, about 240, 360, and just hold it there and let it rest on it while it's turning. So you sort of hold the paper there and let it do that, and yeah, in about 20 or 30 seconds it just takes the gloss off the O-ring and makes it turn perfectly fine. Now what I'm going to do is, these are all warming up. One of them has the heater, the other three don't, and we're going to have a look at the difference in how they warm up based upon whether or not the heater's in use. And the first one with the heater on, I actually just went back. First one with the heater on is actually showing temperature on there. So yeah, the heater's doing its job. Whereas the second one, which I really didn't put together much afterward, is still quite cool. So, and it doesn't have the heater on. So I'm going to let that run for a bit, and we'll come back in probably 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and we'll see how we go. Okay, it's been probably 10 minutes. Yeah, about 10 minutes, and this one's warmed up quite a bit. So it's now up to 183. Let's just on temperature. The others, which didn't have the heater on, are slowly warming up. So if we look at P4, the last one that I did, it's on 11 at the moment. So it's only just reached the temperature where meaningful. This one's only just gone above 1 to 3, so it's only just reached temperature, and this one's still on 1, so there's slight variations in there given the precision we're sort of going for and the amplification on that. It could end up quite a few degrees apart in terms of what the value actually means in real degrees, but we're not too worried about that. We just want to see that it's stable for one thing. That's the main thing with the temperature in these. We're not after a particular temperature. So what we do want to do is actually do some measuring on it. I'll just find a pen. Okay, so what we want to do is we put the projectile on. We want it at the back now. And I'll just check. So okay, so we want it on the backstop. And one of the reasons we sort of want the backstop back a bit is to give a bit of room just to muck around and not place it properly without being annoying. If we've got it too far forward with respect to the boat tail, it'll want to slide that way. So what we want to do is just sort of have it back. We'll put the motor on, we'll ensure it pulls it back to the backstop, we'll turn it off, and at this point we want to calibrate it. Now these are 80 grain 22 projectiles. What you probably want to do for these particular ones is to go into the menu now that it's been zeroed and actually save it. And so, because you might, when they arrive, although I will have tuned all of them to some degree, when they arrive they might not be in the middle of their adjustment. And it's just, the only difference is it's going to take a lot longer to actually get to the zeroing point. Whereas if you've done this and you've saved the zeroing point from 22, then you don't have too far to go when tuning them. So we can see we've got a little bit of variation here, just relating to the temperature not being stable. It's still warming up. I'd probably, actually, what temperature did we set? We set it to 135, but given that's sort of hovering about 175, that's where it naturally wants to be. For the moment though, I'll leave that. If I was doing a dedicated session, I'd probably push it up to maybe 250, just to get it really dedicated. And sorry, I keep pulling it back, but yeah, out of the camera view, I'll have to make sure I don't do that. Okay. So let's start measuring. So just zero that, turn it on, and zero. And so this one, 24, 25, 28. Actually, I'll just double check. 24, 25, 28. So I'll call that 27. Okay. Let it pull back. 29. Actually, that jumped quite a bit. Yeah, 29, 30, that's fine. 1 or 2 doesn't matter too much with these. So 27. So that's 40, 45. Yeah, I'll put the 43. So you notice some of them I do measure it twice. The problem is because it's rotating at a particular speed, it might take 1 or 2 rotations before it is able to sample the worst parts of the projectile. So 29. 27. So I'll go 43, 44, I'll put 44. Now these projectiles have actually been batched out on another device, so I know that they actually represent a range that's not insignificant. So 51, let's just double check. Yeah, I'll just say I'll say 47. So 13, 14, I'll put 14. 37. $44. So we'll call it 18. Okay. So what we have with measuring those is, can we see that okay? So we have a reasonable range. I think the best was our 14 and our 18. So we had two quite good ones. 21 wasn't too bad. So I'd probably say maybe 25 would be a limit for one. 0 to 25 would be a first batch. Okay, there'd be 3 that would fall into that. And I'd consider them to be my really, really good ones. Mind you, they're all good. You know, these are actually Swampworks JLKs, so they are very good projectiles. Even the worst ones shoot really well. But what you're doing is, the worst ones, they shoot really well. They'll probably give you a 6 or a 10 or whatever, but they're not going to give you a super, an X. So what we'll do, and of course the scoring for Australian F-class and US F-class is slightly different, but yeah, we're still talking about super centers versus centers. Now, for this one here, I'd probably say 45 and greater is the worst ones. So, and we've got one, just the one here that's particularly bad, so there's one of them. Okay, so the rest would be 26 to 44, and that would be our main set, so the rest of them fall into that. Yeah, I might have gone and said, oh actually there's 2 at 44, so I might want to. Actually, if I look at it, I've got a 43, a 44, and a 47, another 44. So I might go, ooh, I want to cut 44 off and make it 44 onwards as bad. That's 3. Alright, in which case I'd have 4 that are bad and the rest all fall into this area here. So that's how I'd go through and set this up. Now what we're going to do is the same projectiles on the other units. So I've got that particular one is done. I'm actually going to move it out of the way. Now let's have a look at the second one. Okay, forgive me, it's still got the plastic cover on the LCD, and it's going to make it a little tricky to read it, but we'll do the best we can. So just getting these projectiles ready. Okay, so P2. Now, so the same deal. You want it to be able to pull it back. It's one of the reasons actually, if you're curious, it's on an angle. If it was straight, it wouldn't really pull it back, but putting it on an angle and rotating it the way we are pulls it back onto the backstop quite well. So it's on the backstop now. I'm going to calibrate. And well, it's considering it self-calibrated, so off we go. So that one's gone 35, 36, I'll say 36. Yeah, apologies, it's difficult to read, particularly from my angle. 21. 38. 48. No. Okay. I'll say 52 actually. $34, $33, $34. Okay. So one thing to note, the temperature on this has only got to 55, so this is still warming up, but you can actually get your measurements going while it's warming up. I only ever use them with the heater on anyway. It just allows it to really bring it up above room temperature and really hold it there, and it means it's not something we really have to worry about. It will hold it stable a lot higher above room temperature, more stable than it will if you just let it do relative to room temperature and it's sort of the heat generated from the circuitry in it. But for demonstration purposes you can use it without the heater on. I just don't recommend it. So that one's 58. $37. It's 23. $54. Oh, 59, so let's see what that... Okay, I'll put 58. So you'll note that the measurements are slightly different from the previous unit, but we'll cover that in a sec. So 50... I'm going to call that 56. Oh, actually, no, 58. So factors that cause the difference, one of them is the backstop position relative to the projectile. It will move it or result in it being just a little bit closer or a little bit further away, enough to make a difference. The other thing is that the sensor coil in it, they're all hand wound, so there's variations there. Well, there's variations even if it wasn't hand wound. So we'll call that 37, just double check it. I'll call that 33 actually, because I think the other bit's caused by a bit of temperature drift. You can see that's up to 71 at the moment when it started at 50. Actually, probably what we want to do... No, the zero is not too bad. Oh, sorry, I was just looking at where it's zeroed. If that changes too much, particularly if you're using it while warming up, you'll need to recalibrate a few times. So right now, 36, 37, and lucky last, uh, 57, 58, yeah, 57. Okay, so what we've got there is that we can see for this particular unit we have a variation that's significantly higher. The lowest on this one was the 14. The lowest we've got here, and these are the same projectiles, is a 21 and a 23. So I'd suggest that they were the 14 and the 18 that we had before. So you can see that relatively speaking, we're getting a similar variation, probably percentage-wise if someone wanted to calculate it. But yeah, just the reality of putting them together means that you are going to have some minor variations. So it's, in that respect, it's very difficult to say, hey, you're looking for a value of this to indicate a good projectile. Because if I say, look, a value of 14 means a good projectile, you might be putting your really good projectiles into the wrong batch when it comes to doing it on this particular unit. So I'm actually going to do all four. So we're going to move on and do that. So let's see. A third one, which should have warmed up a bit more by now. Actually, I'll just untangle the cables. Excuse me, I'm drinking a cup of tea while I'm doing this. I may as well be comfortable. Okay. So same projectiles. This one is P3. And we've got the temperature on this is actually sitting pretty similar to P2. So P2 is presently at 83, but it was around the 70s when we were measuring. So this one's the same measurement, 75. Okay, so we've got a projectile on, calibrate it. I should have pulled that back, but I actually pushed it against the backstop. So if I turn that on, turn it off, you can see the value is roughly where we want it. Do another calibration just to be sure. Okay, so let's get measuring. We press 0, that one's coming in at 20, or 21. 33. And I suppose that's one of the things with these numbers. We'll have a look at the end if I remember. You get a good enough variation between the numbers that 1 or 2 is not going to matter too much. So that's 25, 24, 25. So, you know, waiting for it to rotate right round a second or third time just to get to see if the number climbs by 1 or 2 is not really going to put it out too far. 20. Particularly while it's still warming up. So this is up to 81 already. It was at 75 when we started. So 23. So 35. 18. 34. 10. 9, 10. 13. 27. 31. 18, 19. Okay, so that's those ones. So if we have a look at that compared to this one, we can see that the variation, let's see, our best one, 2 and 18, so we do have our 3 good ones. Okay, and you can see the range is actually very similar. Like we don't have the situation where it's suddenly measuring one way out compared to the others. We do have that spread, so you know, where I'm going is it does measure consistently, and that's sort of one of the things. You know, you've got all of these projectiles to go through. You want to know, hey, I go through and I measure them. If I go through and measure them again, are they going to come out the same? And it's like the answer is they're going to differ by 1 or 2, but they're not going to differ by a lot, because these things actually work. So get on to the last one, and then we're done with our demonstration. So okay, last one, lucky lasts. So we've got P4. Let's see how we're going. So put that on. Motor, will it pull it back? Yes, it's struggling. Ah, no, I've managed to pull it back onto the backstop. So even though I had the boat tail in front of the peak, still managed to pull it back. Now set this to calibrate. Okay, we're ready to go. So yeah, the temperature on this is at 97. If I look at 3, it's at 99. If I look at 2, it's at 91. So they're warming up quite evenly. The temperatures relative to each other aren't too bad. So just zero that. 31. 22 or 22, 25. That one's, I'll call that 23. Now, given what we're measuring, which is we're trying to very precisely measure jacket thickness, these units or the technique with the electromagnetics, and I've probably covered it in some of the other videos when I was doing the initial development of them many years ago for my own purposes. If you let the signal just resonate, like many things do, what you end up with is a skin effect, and effectively all you're doing is measuring the outside roundness. So you're measuring how far, you're measuring how far, I'm going to turn that off, you're actually measuring how far from the surface to the sensor, and you're not getting that penetration. So to get the penetration, what you actually have to do is drive that signal at a frequency that will penetrate, that is a lot higher than the frequency it will tune itself to, resonate at, based upon skin effect. So yeah, you really want to drive it at a penetrating frequency, which is what these do, and that allows us to accurately get penetration and the jacket thickness, so we can get those internal variations. If you're not doing that, you're not actually getting the internal variations. Anyway, back to it. So now I was playing with that, had it turned off and turned back on, but I can see here that the measurement hasn't really put it out of tune. It's still around 500. So I'll go and put 24 on that because I was talking instead of noting it. So I'll go 20. 12. 22. 34. I'll call that 30 and just double check it. Oh, I'm going to call it 35. $20, $19, 20. 31. 24. And the last one, 29, let's see. I'm going to call it 30. So when we look at that, with respect to the others, we can see that the measurements on this one, let's see, our smallest is 12, 13, what else have we got? 20, perhaps we've got a couple at 20, 24, so where's our third good one? 12, 13. Okay, maybe it's one of the 20s. You might be measuring it at there, and that's one of the things actually. It can be measuring just with the backstop different, it can be measuring slightly differently, but not enough to be too significant. Where's our worst one? So our worst one, we've got a 34. And how bad were we on the others? Anyway, the results for these two here compare reasonably well, P3 and P4, and I think they felt, yeah, then P1 was next and then P2. So there's a demonstration of these units in operation, just going through and working out your spread, and yeah, showing off some of the newer features. And how to tune it. So we've got our little tool, and you want to sand that down if you're finding that it's slipping on your projectiles, and that's it. So thank you for watching. Now at present, one of these is spoken for. Actually, I'll say two of them are spoken for, because I'm going to replace my one with one of these units. My one's a bit crazy with some of the experiments I've been doing on it, and where these ones measure small amounts, you know, in these numbers, my other one that I've been developing, it measures probably 3 times the amount number wise, and that's just getting ridiculous. So it's a bit harder to track your batches and whatnot, whereas smaller numbers, a lot more convenient to deal with. But these numbers aren't so small that you're losing your detail. So that's actually a good thing. So yeah, signing off. Thank you for listening. 2 of these are available if people want them. And I'm in a position to put together 7 more, 6 more quite quickly. And another 10 if it's required. So, and hopefully, if these come back as being quite stable and people are happy with them, I'll look at start shipping them overseas. Now, one of the things with respect to that is that doing the money transfer, for one. Yeah, I'm just a person doing this as a hobby, so I'm not really set up from a business perspective to be trying to do that. So I've got to figure out, get that all worked out, and then of course there's support and whatnot. So probably what I'll do when I ship them out is I'll ship them out with multiple ones of these components that can potentially break. So, you know, I'll probably send out a couple of these as well. There's no reason not to. Send out a couple of backstops. There's no reason not to. And yeah. So, And what I will do is actually send out spares. I'll send out a full 4 of the bearings because these are Delrin. So I'll send out 4 spare ones, and I'll probably send out some steel ones as well. So if something happens and they come off, they get knocked off or pried out, it's very difficult to glue them in. They're sitting on top to some respect, and it's just super glue that's used. If one gets lost, at least I've given you a replacement and we don't have any issues there trying to source one. So that's my plan, and we'll see how we go. So thank you again for listening. I know I've said that 3 or 4 times now. Goodbye, and have fun in your lockdowns like we all are.